Everything from questions about cucumbers to homes on cul-de-sacs. You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show with Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and James DeFreitas, the son. For the next hour, learn about gardening, growing your favorite veggies, and growing your profits in real estate. Call them anytime at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I am Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and you are?
And of course, I am James DeFreitas, the son, and each and every week we talk about gardening and or your real estate matters. And I always like to tell people, too, that if you have a gardening question, you can always go to AskMrGreenthumb.com. Don't go to the MISTER, go to AskMrGreenthumb.com. And that we actually have an Ask link that you can go to directly on the website. And once you click on that, you can actually submit a photo that you've taken with your phone, and so it's real easy. You can just attach it and then put up there your question, whether it's a plant identification, whether you're having a problem in your yard, whether it's a bug. You know, we get a lot of bug questions, and one of the bug questions we had a couple of weeks ago is somebody took a picture because it looked like a blowtorch. Somebody had, they had a yard, and right next to the sidewalk, it looked like somebody had, taken a blowtorch to their grass.
And that was chinch bug.
And it was, so they took a little picture of this bug that they had found in their yard, and and it had like looked like a little hourglass on the back.
It does. It's a tiny little 1/5 of an inch insect with a little white on the back. Mm-hmm. The small ones are going to have a little red on their back, mm-hmm. and they're even tinier, and people are often looking for a big bug. But I can tell you, chinch bug damage will normally show up where it's hot. Sidewalk, street, somewhere first where that sun is really hitting it. Chinch bugs they must not get their sunscreen on because they seem to really like it hot. And, some like it hot. Chinch bugs like it hot.
They like it hot. Well, we'd like to mention today, too, that we do have a guest today in studio with us, and it is the one, the only Terry Kelley, who was our market president over at Berkshire Hathaway. That's where we first met you. And, and I have to say, it was such a nice budding relationship that we had with you there, and your leadership skills were fantastic. We were able to ask you all kinds of questions in real estate because you're just a wealth of knowledge. And but now you are off to REMAX. So tell us a little bit about your new relationship there at REMAX.
Well, before I became the market president in my previous company, I was actually with REMAX.
Okay, so you had a history there.
I had a history there, and very good success. When I decided to get back into sales, I went back to REMAX for the purpose of knowing the system very well, knowing how they work, and without hesitation. It's just the right setup for me.
Sure. They're a good company. I mean, Berkshire Hathaway is a good company. Keller Williams is a good company. So we love them all. One of the problems we had is that we liked Terry so much, we knew we thought we wanted to leave, quite honestly, but we said, gosh, we've got the best market president we've had,
right?
And we'd had a few that we'd worked with, and they were fine. But Terry was another level better.
Right.
And
right.
So one of the reasons we wanted to have you in, even though you're not with us, we still feel as a brethren. And one of the nice things about Terry, he said, when you guys leave, I'm still going to be your biggest cheerleader.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things we loved about Terry, is
right.
that he had that, I want to help everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really stuck with me was something that you said to us was we were in your office and you said, I want whatever is best for you. And, that really struck a chord with me because I said, wow, this is rare. You generally find people that are trying to advise people on what is best for them in their own careers. You find, and again, it's not to say that a lot of people don't want people to have success, but what you wind up finding is there's the individual message and then there's the corporate memo. The how do we keep people into an environment that maybe isn't necessarily the best for them long term. And so when we were in that situation, it was nice because we were able to put ourselves in the spotlight and be able to determine what we thought would be the best course of action for us. And so, and then ultimately it must be the same for you as well in trying to find your best path. And I guess, moving on to REMAX was probably the next best chapter you could head to.
Well, definitely. I mean, it's not always about the company.
Right.
It's about the individual and their path that they take. Every company in this area is really, really good. I don't have anything bad to say about any company or anything, but not everyone is designed for every company.
Sure.
And so for them to be successful, they have to do what's in their heart and what's right for them.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I can't say enough good things about Berkshire Hathaway, because they really did put us on a path that I would never have considered had I not joined with the company when we did. It was one of those situations where Stan and I really hadn't even thought about the concept of an auction and how it could relate to real estate. One of the reasons, that we can have any agent on from any company is because we do work with any agent. I mean, for the first time ever, every agent that I meet, generally, unless they're on the same team, they generally look at every other agent as competition. I mean, that's just, and in some really tight communities, it can be pretty brutal and ruthless. I know some ladies that are in the condo area that we were at, and they're just, you put a business card up on their bulletin board, those are fighting words.
Yeah, they'll be off of there and within 20 seconds.
Oh, and you'll get a phone call too, going, "Hey, this is my farming community. What the heck were you thinking? I'll meet you at the corner and we'll get this hashed out. Bring your dukes."
Yeah, they normally bring brass knucks too, so it's not even going to be a fair fight.
Right. So I mean, and again, I mean, I would say my experience is that I've if you have a disagreement, most of the guys in the real estate business I can get around that, but do not upset the ladies. They will come at you with both barrels, and they mean business. So. That's been my experience anyway. But needless to say, it is a fun business. I mean, there's, and again, as Stan and I were talking before, it's one of these things that, and I say this for new agents, pay attention less to the money. The money will come. Take yourself out of the equation too, and try to pay attention to the client and really listen. The listening part is something I think most of the new agents seem to have the most trouble with. It's, they want to be helpful. They don't always know how to be helpful. We had the great Bobby Paolini in here a 3 weeks ago, and he said something that that stuck with me that I can't get out of my brain. He said the new agents are just like that you sometimes would see them at the mall or at the fair, when people would when we used to congregate, and back in 2019, so long ago. But he said you'd see this little game show thing where people would go into an acrylic box and then they would blow money around. He goes, the new agents, they have these little baby hands and they're trying to grab a hold of the money inside the box, but they can't quite grab it. And it's because of inexperience and not knowing the process of how to reach out to people in the correct way. And that stuck with me. So, that really is kind of in a nutshell how they operate. I do have a whole litany of questions I can ask you. Why don't we do this? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your name and your company name that you're with?
Absolutely. My name's Terry Kelley. I'm with REMAX Champions out of Trinity, and I've been in the business since 1984. I was a mortgage loan officer for 10 years as well.
Okay.
And I moved here 10 years ago and went with REMAX. Then I got my broker's license, then joined Berkshire Hathaway as managing broker there, and just recently went back to REMAX as a sales person.
Sure. So you got the opportunity to work with the great Mike Plum over there in the Trinity office.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
He is an interesting cat. I mean,
he's very knowledgeable. Been in it a long time, and that's where I grew my personality and my strength in business was from learning from the people that have been there.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I have to, again, give mad props to Berkshire Hathaway, one of the things that really sets aside any brokerage, and Berkshire Hathaway certainly in that camp as well, is the training. No matter where you go, if a brokerage is interested in educating the base and bringing everybody up, that is helpful. Again, certain brokerages, now REMAX in particular, now I can't speak to your particular brokerage, but I can speak to how REMAX Metro operated. They would not take anybody unless you had 2 years of experience, and you had to have a certain threshold of sales. So it's good from a brokerage standpoint. I could see the pros and cons to that. The bad is that sometimes you are going to get some really good salespeople that are going to develop into great agents, but they're going to have to do it somewhere else first. I don't know if that's how your REMAX is operating.
Well, originally, yes.
Okay.
But when I came aboard, part of the reason for me to go on was that I came on as a mentor. We're actually starting a program that is not popular or not been part of REMAX, and it is bringing on new agents, but instead of other agents mentoring them, I'm doing the mentoring.
Okay, great.
And we're keeping it to 5 at a time, and then once we get those agents successful through a certain number of transactions, then they move on up into the REMAX split, and then we bring on 5 more. And
that's fantastic.
It's set up to build loyalty, but that's new for REMAX.
Yeah, and that's a great business model for any real estate company. So that's it's definitely things that I know we do have a lot of professionals and a lot of people that are in the business that listen to our program, and I know that they're always looking for that new way to do things, and so it's always fun to bring someone in that has the level of experience that you have and learn different ways of doing things. So you already told us you've been in the business since 1984, you said. So that goes back to the book days when the MLS, no computers. It was, you find all the listings in a book.
The good old days.
You find them in the book, you pull up to the house, call them, set the appointment, and it was carbon paper,
right,
contracts, all that.
But yeah, I mean, back to the days where face-to-face, I mean, everything's face-to-face, no texting. We were not even in the pager stage yet. I don't think that started until, the 90s, I think. I think in the late 80s, we had the suitcase cell phones that started to make I remember you had
I had one of the big ones.
You had a suitcase.
It looked like a suitcase that I carried around.
Yeah, it was like basically a luggage rack.
I did, too. I set it in the console of my car and plugged it into my...
Yep, I had the same one.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I mean to think of the things that we have now, and how now I will say this, I don't necessarily now, and again I'm kind of caught in between two worlds, but I will say one thing: I don't necessarily know if the convenience has actually made communication better.
Yes and no.
Yeah. So I definitely want to talk more about that because we've been so dominated over the last year and a half with Zoom phone calls and Zoom this and Zoom that. I want to talk more about that. We don't have time to get into that just yet because we're going to go pay some bills with a break here in a second. But I do want to talk more about how communications have been done during this pandemic and how it's changed the real estate business for the better or for the worse.
If you've got some plant questions, you can send them to me, but you can also send some real estate questions. And if you've got a question for Terry, you can send that to us as well, and we'll forward it on to Terry. So this process continues. Make sure you stay with us. Here is the Plant and Real Estate Talk continues here on WGUL.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at askmrgreenthumb.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial problems with flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And we're here to help answer your questions. I'm Stan, my son's James, and we have Terry in studio with us. And that means that we're going to ask some questions. We might ask Terry, I'm going to say, what's your favorite or funniest happening in real estate that you've gone through in the last decade or so? Any great story there?
Well, about 25 years ago was my funniest. In Alabama, it was on an October afternoon. It was sleeting. And I wasn't feeling really good, but I had to do this open house. And I went in. It was a vacant home, but they did have some furniture in it. And I built a fire, really nice. I was sleepy, got in the recliner. I fell asleep. I woke up, and people were walking through the house, and they actually bought it.
See? So maybe that's a good technique.
Well, I wanted to show them, and I told them, I said, I did that for a reason, just to prove to you that's a very homely home.
Well, yeah, I love it. You take a negative and run with it and make it a positive, and that's
Absolutely.
one of the beauties of Terry, is that
They just want to know, does Terry come with the home too? Because we just love the ambiance that he delivered here. Yeah, that's great.
Well, I know you've actually helped some of your agents on occasion show stuff when they couldn't. Yes. And to me, that is fantastic. And I know you caught some heat. I won't go into that story for helping other agents one time. And I always thought he should be commended if your broker will go out of their way to help a fellow agent. That is fantastic, and you get double pats on the back for that. And, of course, the agent who told you, the other supervisor who said, oh, you shouldn't have, well, I'm not going to say a lot about that. I won't go into that at all because I would only say negative things, and that's not who I am.
And you're too positive a guy.
I'm too positive to say that.
That's
but
right.
I commend you for doing that because not every broker would.
Well, in this market today, with everything that's going on in the country, you know, we have to work together. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what name we have on our business card from a company standpoint. If people don't like us, they're not going to work with us.
Sure.
Amen.
And so we have to work together. There's not a company out there that I don't want to see succeed.
And that's beautiful. And that's the way it ought to be. We all should be helping each other and wanting everyone to be successful. I mean, when I have agents call me and I said, look, if you want to call us in on the air and you have an open house, we'll let you do that because I don't care who you're with. We want to see you be successful.
Sure.
And we believe kind of like Terry does, and that is, throw your bread upon the water and all things will be taken care of. So we're not out there going, it has to just be us.
Right.
We know there are there's another million agents out there. We're just, two of them.
Sure. And something we talked about in last week's show is there is this theory out there in almost every business that you're in, and including real estate. People think that you're only mediocre if you're not a little controversial. And I disagree with that. I believe that it's okay to be loved by all, or at least try to be loved by all as much as you can. It's one of the reasons that Stan and I are fairly neutral in our politics. We have our beliefs, and we believe in certain things, and we certainly have our Christian background, and that doesn't always sit well with certain people, but that's too bad. We are who we are. But at the end of the day, I do try to put forward a neutral essence of who I am, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to help as many people as I can, and I don't really care how you vote at the polling station, because our job is to help people. And if we allow the politics of our differences to matter more than our similarities, then that's when we run into problems. And the thing that I find is that we tend to let our 3 or 4% differences tank an entire relationship when we actually have more in common than we don't.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Everybody should say, hey, and I'm amazed that it really has become more polarized over I don't remember it ever being this polarized when I grew up.
Yeah, in the last 20 years.
Somebody was a Democrat or somebody was a Republican, but it wasn't like, oh, I hate you for this, or I'm such a genius, I will tell you what your governor should do or shouldn't do. And to me, that's just crazy, because the people who usually say that are the ones that, to me, are usually not that smart.
Right.
But they'll say, how did they know anything? I'm the only one that knows anything. And you go, well, what did you do in life? Well, I didn't do very much, but I'll tell you what's what. And I'm going, back off just a tad.
Sure, exactly. And I always say, too, it's not how much money you make, it's how much good did you do?
Sure.
How many people did you help in this lifetime? To me, that's much more impressive than looking at the Forbes richest people list. I mean, that doesn't do a whole lot for me. But what did you do to help people? Were you active in your church? Did you provide donations? Did you help people that needed help when they needed it? That, to me, is more important in life. And I think if you have that philosophy, especially in real estate, that can be much more beneficial to your career, because then you're giving without expectation of receiving, and that is the ultimate thing that I think we should strive for. And it's not talked enough about. And our news is guilty of it. We tend to only talk about the negative things that happen in life. But
it tends to be, if it bleeds, it leads. That used to be the old axiom that was used in the news studios.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, that's the headlines sometimes sell. But, we're here to try to sell you on good things.
That's right.
And that means getting your home. I always love seeing somebody, the first-time home buyer. You know, because you see them, they drive around the block 2 or 3 times, and you can just see it's like getting your first car. You know, you're just happy. You don't think about the insurance and all the stuff we don't even want to mention that brings you down just a tad. But that home ownership, I think, is great, and I think it's something we should see I'd like to see all folks be able to get into a home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, one of the things that we have you've dealt with this too, but in particular in Pinellas County, I mean, again, Stan and I don't typically get into working with a whole lot of acting as buyers agents, but again, you go where there are more people, and again, we have more buyers than sellers at this point in our markets, and in particular, one of the things that I find a little bit troublesome is that we're working with a nurse and then a school teacher. Both have good jobs, and they have reasonable requirements, and they can't afford to buy a home in Pinellas County. Can't do it. It's just not enough for what they want, for the square footage that they want. They want a 3.2, 1,500 square feet. I can't find them anything that's in decent shape in Pinellas County for $300,000, which is what their budget is. Can't find it. And I find that to be a little bit of a travesty.
Well, maybe we'll have an agent out there calling in going, hey, I've got something that fits the bill.
Sure.
And if you can, we'd like that to happen. But
it is, and it starts with listening really good up front.
Absolutely. And we'll continue talking more about that as we go and we pay some bills here. But don't change the dial. We are here on AM 860, The Answer.
We're glad that you're listening to us, and we hope that you'll tell all your neighbors and friends to listen in each and every Sunday morning.
Want to talk real estate auctions? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, floridaauctionteam.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at askmrgreenthumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Give them a call, 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I know James and I are very happy to have Terry Kelley with us, a good man, and I can't say that about everybody, but we are proud to have him as one of our friends, and he was one of our mentors, and excellent guy, and personally, I think the last place you were with should have paid you any amount of money to have kept you, but I won't go into that because they probably already realized the horrible mistake they've made by not giving you, bringing a Rolls Royce to you and saying, please, please, please stay. But that's my own humble opinion.
Don't worry, Terry. We can edit that part out. It's all good. Don't worry. You won't be getting any unfavorable letters in the mail.
Hey, aren't I entitled to my opine?
You are. So, kind of dovetailing onto something that Stan had asked you before is that now he asked you one of the funnier stories that you can recount. Now,
which was funny.
Right. And that's a great story. But one of the things that I find interesting, and I ask a lot of experienced agents, things I'd like to ask experienced agents is, tell us about a real estate transaction that you were involved in where it didn't go exactly the way you thought it was going to go, or it didn't go as perfectly as you had hoped it would go. But so you ran into some adversity, but you were able to overcome it.
You had to juggle and be the peacemaker all in one fell swoop.
This was a couple of years ago, actually, and it was a VA buyer. Very, very difficult for the lender. And being a former loan officer, I understood what the lender was going through. The lender called me and asked me if I would take it because she knew that a lot of experience type thing. This person had PTSD, so I was very conscious about that and understanding. And it was just one of those things that there was always problems that were popping up. And so I've always known and always learned from very experienced agents as I was getting into the business. Cooler heads prevail. There was 3 or 4 times that the deal could have totally fell apart. And I was able to really just say, okay, guys, let's take about a 24-hour break and let's reconvene tomorrow.
Sure.
The seller got involved, and fired his listing agent midstream.
Oh boy.
The listing agent had done a great job. It was just a seller that was kind of off target. And I was just in that situation. I called the listing agent that had lost the listing, and I said, "Listen, we're still going to pay you a referral fee. You know, you've worked hard. We understand. We're just going to get it closed." The last day on the last extension, we got to a Friday. We were at the end of our last extension, and the seller, who I was dealing with at that time, was just not very cooperative. And so he was not going beyond the last extension. And I told him, I said, "I understand, you know, no problem." The lender busted her rear end and got it done. She paid out of her pocket money for the title company to stay late.
Wow.
We closed it on Friday at 7 p.m. And the VA guy was thanked for his service, got his house, and everybody was happy.
Wow. So again, going the extra mile, people that were willing to put in the extra time to make something happen, was able to get that transaction closed. I mean, yeah, and you know, and again, I mean, something that's happened more recently for us in a deal that we were doing is that. Again, I don't know how to say this without sounding somewhat like I'm putting someone down, but I'm not. It's just in the real estate business, you have a lot of different personalities. And one of the things that I do find a little troublesome is that sometimes I will hear from an agent and they'll start telling me that they've got 30 years of experience. And I'm fine with people telling me how long they've been in the business, but it's not okay to tell me how long you've been in the business and then do it wrong. And you know, because then I find it just that much more challenging to ignore the fact that you kept telling me how many years you were in the business, and then for me to have to sit back and go, well, then you ought to know X, Y, and Z. I find that challenging, and of course I never say anything because I know one of the things you just said was cooler heads prevail, and it does. And one of the things that you have to remember is. It's not, when you're in a transaction, it's not always the time, especially when it's, you know, if it's a business partner, fine. You can sit back and you can have those conversations. You can pull back and let's talk about how to handle something. But I find that in a real estate transaction, the time to teach somebody something isn't in a transaction if you're working with a listing agent or you're the buying agent or vice versa. Right. They're not going to hear it. Okay, they're going to hear and they're going to get defensive. Right. You know, so to me, that's not the time to do that. No, what I typically do is I'll leave like a breadcrumb trail, you know, and I find that's much more receptive. Or I'll ask very pointed questions, you know. So I'll give you for instance. Now this transaction hasn't closed yet, but you know the agent was very nice throughout the whole thing, but she's had to tell me several times how much experience she has, and that's great. But you know, it's said right there in the condo docs that the condo board has to approve the new buyer. And it stipulated the time and all of that as to when that needed to take place. Well, early on in the transaction, I had submitted to her a application packet that I had received from the HOA. And I said, here you go. Here's the packet. Well, somewhere between when I sent her the packet, the board had voted on a new one and never told me that they had changed it. So, again, so what she was able to do was she was able to blame me to her client that I was the dumb agent who gave her the wrong application. And it turns out that I had received mid-swing the wrong application. So it wasn't even my fault. But again, one of the rules in the packet was that they needed 10 business days in order to run a background check and approve the buyer. And again, for those that don't know, condo boards can be exceedingly, they can scrutinize things in a way that's very different than in a regular transaction where you're just selling a home or, something that isn't bound by other legal instruments that you find in a homeowners association or a condo association. A condo association, in my mind, has been generally, they're even tighter than a homeowners association on how they govern things, and there's also some differences on what you legally own. So one of the things here is that you can only be as good as the information that you're being provided at. But again, as I told her, I said, hey, listen, it doesn't matter. I want to get this deal closed. How do I help you? How do I help you get what you need done so that I can be part of the solution to this problem rather than you looking at me as somebody who created the problem? And that disarmed her because she was, she really was looking at me like I was the jerk here. And I didn't want her to think of me in that way because every agent that I'm working with is potentially a client, especially in the real estate auction business. I want them to think of me as, oh, that guy's a problem solver, not a problem starter. And I think that's another mindset that really, especially when the agents come out of real estate school, it's not yes, I know you've learned all of these wonderful laws and state statutes and all of this stuff that are fresh in your mind. And all of that stuff is great and it has a place. But trying to educate the other people that you're working with while you're in a transaction, it's a terrible time to do it.
It really is. And I've found over the years that if an agent has to brag about the number of years they have in the business or the experience they have in the business, there's going to be problems.
Yep, absolutely.
Because they're hiding something. That's ego.
Yeah.
And I never tell people, how long I've been in the business or for anything like that. If they ask and we get into the conversation, yes. But in dealing with new agents, what I've found most effective is I will sit down with them and tell them, you never have to tell another agent that you're brand new.
Right.
You do what you're supposed to do legally. You do what you're supposed to do ethically, and you're fine. You're just like they are.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's probably best. And the one thing I would say is if you don't know, ask. And all the time we get calls on the show. People will ask me some very complicated real estate stuff, and you know what I'll tell them? I don't know. I'll write your question down.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. I'll write down your question, and I'll tell you what, I'll have an answer for you the next show. Because at the end of the day, that's sometimes that's the best information. To wing it and get it wrong is way worse. So find out. Knowledge is power. And whether it's real estate or gardening, if you don't know, ask.
Sure. I don't know every plant and every tree out there. And people sometimes say, don't you know them all? No, I said, because I'd have to be the Encyclopedia Britannica to know every plant and every tree. And I'll tell you that I don't know them all. And there are people in certain areas that know more than I do. If they spend their whole life in orchids or their whole life in cacti, they know that inside and out. I don't. I mean, I know of orchids and I know of different trees and things, and I can help you with most of the questions. I've seen a lot of the problems, partly because I answered 100,000 questions while I worked as an extension horticulturist for the University of Florida. But, I say God bless my time there, even though I wasn't I wasn't making big bucks working for the government back in those days. In fact, most people today who work for the government aren't making big bucks, at least locally.
Sure.
Maybe, if you're up at the federal level, that might be different. But I enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed helping people. And the same thing we do in real estate. A young agent comes up and says, I don't like talking to people. And I'm going, you may be in the wrong business, or you're going to have to learn to talk to people because it's a people business.
Right. It really is a belly-to-belly business. And, and it's one of these things where I find... we were talking about this earlier. I mean, the technology, the Zoom, the this, that, I look at Zoom as better than nothing. But it isn't better than being in person, and it's not better than having a conversation, to where we can see whether or not we're making a connection between, reading people in the room is so much easier for me than trying to guess whether or not I'm making a connection over Zoom. And that to me has been one of the greatest challenges over the last 18 months is trying to navigate this easier world that doesn't necessarily result to a better form of communication in my opinion.
We're so glad we could have Terry with us here.
Yeah,
answering
absolutely.
questions, and our old buddy here who we thank you.
I think we have another break
segment coming up.
I think we have another segment coming up.
Yeah, one more after this. So stay with us.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at askmrgreenthumb.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial problems with flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I am Stan DeFreitas, and you are James DeFreitas, and we have Kelly with us, who is one of our old mentors.
Terry Kelley.
Terry Kelley. I knew Terry. I was going to say Terry Kelley, but I sometimes call him Kelly as well. He'll answer
Mr.
anything.
Kelley.
He'll answer anything that's said in both U.S. Language or Alabamian, which he can speak as well. So, well, I'm just joking.
One quick thing I was going to mention to since we are focusing heavily on real estate on this particular show is that one of the things that I found interesting, and again, I get a lot of my news, and you probably do too, from the Florida Realtors, and one of the and I always go through for the show and try to find interesting articles to talk about, and this one caught my attention as it was, we're always a month behind when we're trying to gather data as to how things are moving, and again, I'm pretty data focused when it comes to figuring out the market and trying to at least figure out trends of what has already happened. One of the things that I learned was that it said Lakeland and Tampa Bay area are the most overpriced in Florida, both a little more than 31% above where they should be. So, that's an interesting thought, because I always think of Miami. And I always think of that real estate as being kind of where things could get really overpriced quickly. And I mean, and you were talking about having been in the business since the 80s. I always used to look back to Miami and Dade and look to see what was going on there to try to make that be a determination of what was going to happen in this market. Because we were always a little behind what was happening there, just because it was always a bigger market. But maybe some of those dynamics have changed over time.
I think so. Here in the Tampa area, Tampa is a real transient area. Mm-hmm. People move in and out of Tampa a lot.
Yeah.
So that's why you see I think the increase is the way you see it.
Sure.
In the Miami area, it's more of a destination.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I also think too this area has also become exceedingly popular too. Tampa Bay, with having the Lightning and having Tom Brady and having a Buccaneer team that's finally worth its salt to be able to tune on and be able to watch.
Good baseball team too,
and a good baseball team as well. Yeah. Well, the secret there is just don't pay anybody anything, and
we've been lucky.
Yeah.
Good recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, we have the opposite of the Yankees philosophy. Just don't pay them anything, and we're good to go. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So I try to pull out some articles, but it does say that the overheated market may be slowing down. And it talks about July sales numbers. And again, summertime has always been sort of a downtime in real estate. It's it's sort of a cooling off time. It's never going to be as hot as it was in the springtime. Although, again, I mean, if you go on Facebook and if you're just going off of that, I mean, I call that the ultimate cheerleading. Everyone goes on Facebook to talk about how great their sales have been and what a great agent they are and how you should pick them and everything else. I don't necessarily know if that has the influence that I think people think it has. I think you have to have the know, like, and trust aspect. People have to know that know you on a personal level. I don't think you can just put up 100 Facebook things and say, pick me, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the social media aspect has changed real estate to a degree, but you can never replace the personal aspect.
Yeah, and that's, I think that was my concern with Zoom. Did it make the talking head scenario any better? I mean, or did it make it worse?
Well, when I first went in as managing broker at my previous company, the first week we shut down with COVID. And I had to do everything by Zoom for the first 3 months.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
I'm a very in-person, personal person. And that drove me nuts for 3 months.
Ugh.
Because it's like watching TV.
Yeah.
However, you make the best of what you got.
Right, but I think we were all kind of learning too the ground rules. I mean, I was doing some trading recently for Keller Williams, and great. I mean, again, great training. But I noticed that the ground rules are still, we happen to be in person because that's the way I tend to like to operate too. I mean, I guess I'm sort of old school in that way. But I happened to notice that the Zoom meeting that was taking place while it was an in-live instruction as well, that you have people doing things that they would never do if it were in person. You got a guy that's, he's pulling up his iPad and he's got his bowl there and he's got his Cocoa Puffs and he's pouring his Cocoa Puffs into the bowl and he's got his whole milk and he's getting a glug, 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 and he's sitting there getting his learning going on as he's crunching away with his happy little crunchy munchies that he has in his bowl. And I'm thinking, would you do that in a live in-person meeting? Would you, or would you maybe have the Cocoa Puffs earlier? And but that's the kind of things that I was noticing, that anything goes in a Zoom meeting. I once watched a girl floss her teeth in a Zoom meeting, and I thought, oh, okay, multitasking, right on. We can't be doing that later, I guess. We got to do that now. But she was, was asking good questions while the floss was stuck in her teeth. But, it just, to me...
Her dentist was proud.
Her dentist was proud.
Yes.
I don't know how professional it looked. But I do notice that there are people that are willing to do things in a Zoom meeting that they would never do if it was an in-person meeting.
I totally agree. And I finally got to the point to where I cut off all Zoom meetings.
Amen. Thank you.
And I told him, I said, listen, I respect the fact if you don't want to come in, absolutely, no worries. But what we're going to do in person, period.
Right.
That's great.
Because it's effective.
And it's effective.
It's effective. You can ask questions. I always found it difficult because, if you can't, and again, this is not a slap at Keller Williams. It's just they're having to deal with the same problem that all these other corporations are having to deal with, which is trying to figure it out, So one of the issues that, I leaned over and I was telling Stan, I said, look, and I said, I wanted to ask the instructor a question, but the problem is because it was geared to be a Zoom meeting. I mean, even though I was in person, I had this tendency to want to pull out my laptop, join the Zoom meeting so I could potentially ask the question to the in-live instructor and have more of a connection that way, because I could tell how focused he was on the students that were watching on camera. And so that's another component to this new world that we seem to be in. So I'm hoping that real estate brokerages slowly migrate away from Zoom. I know at Keller Williams we are, they gave us a, they're going to phase it out at the end of the year, and in January the hope is that we can just go to all live in-person instruction again. Which is, how do I go into a mock auction on Zoom? Right. It doesn't make sense. And I can't get people, Stan and I can't get people excited, and I can't judge their, I like to see the body language, I like to see their faces smiling,
Yeah, we can do it live. We can get to them.
Right. I mean, that's to say, so that's something I'm hoping that things will get better. I'm hoping we're not going to have a new Zeta variant that gets hyped up, and then we go through this another 6 months. I don't even want to suggest it, but I it's one of these things.
Delta 1001.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what more are you going to throw at us that we're going to have to accept.
Well, I think the biggest thing from a real estate perspective is to stay calm.
Right.
Keep doing the right things. Do the things that got you business before, to the extent that you can.
Right.
And if you are of the person that can't get out, if you are the person that's concerned about, the COVID stuff, then definitely take care of yourself.
Sure.
But this too will end.
Yes, absolutely.
And the strong will survive.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, this will become an endemic, where, and it'll just be like the regular flu, where we take a shot every year, I guess, and we'll go about our merry way, and we will develop immune systems to be robust and be able to handle this, So, but again, I do want to make sure, because one of the things I was talking to some of the managing brokers with Keller Williams, I said, man, you guys have a Zoom problem. You got people that want to do it easy, and I'm thinking this isn't just them. This has got a lot of companies are dealing with this, where, if they can't do it the easy way, they just don't want to do it, So we're going to have to bridge that gap when the time is right to get people to come back into the office and do business the way we used to do it. The better. The more responsible way of doing it, where we have insured communication, where we know everyone's fully understanding.
And I think it's going to get there.
I hope so.
We
I
just
really
have
do.
to be patient and get through it, and hope for the best.
Absolutely. And again, if people out there, if they're interested in getting a hold of you, Terry, how do they do so?
You can certainly reach me by my cell phone at 205-835-5143, or my email is terry.kelley, that's Kelley, at remax.net.
Gotcha. And you're at REMAX
Champions in Trinity.
REMAX Champions in Trinity. Beautiful looking office. You sent me some photos of that location. It's a wonderful place. And if you're in that area and you need some help, Terry Kelley is the man that could help you in Trinity. He will be the best agent you could ever hope to find.
We appreciate you coming in and being part of the show, as always. And
well, I appreciate you guys having me, and certainly let me know if I can ever help.
Absolutely.
We hope to have you back one of these days. Till next week, enjoy your life and garden just as much as you can.